Hi everybody, welcome. This video will be the first video you see during your first week back after March break, or at least back in terms of being everyday students. Probably going to be one of the most unusual experiences in your academic career. Certainly it is for me. It will be an interesting couple of weeks, probably a stressful stretch. I think just in a general sense, there's a lot of stress in the world. I think that's kind of obvious. But I'm going to try to make the best of it, and I am going to try to provide you with as much, hopefully, helpful feedback as I can in terms of videos and other kinds of materials, so that while it's not a perfect experience, you're not losing too much. I've planned the 2 weeks to come fairly thoroughly. I'm going to start rolling out at least the first week today in terms of lessons. I just want to talk a little bit so you understand, and you'll see this underneath on the feed for the page, so that you understand what's going to be happening and what my expectations are going to be. First quick point, and I do want to sort of speak a little bit about sort of philosophical positions just for a minute or two. I really do want to teach you as much as I would have in the classroom. Obviously, certain experiences that would have been more sort of group activities, and there's a couple of sort of fun ones. Unfortunately, they're going to get sacrificed because they're not very possible to run in an online sort of non-interactive setting. But I have tried as much as I can to put together not just sort of a number of very simple PowerPoints, which I could have easily done, but also some discussion, some sort of commentary, so that if you are a person who benefits a lot from sort of the experience of being in a classroom and getting that oral feedback, you'll get that. And you'll also get a little bit more of a clarification, which is sometimes easier to provide in an oral form than it is in other ways. We've had a lot of discussion as teachers over the last week about what to do. I've got to be honest, it's been a bit of an information overload. Unfortunately, one of the dilemmas with these sorts of situations is that there's a variety of educational sort of institutions and companies out there that have put together online software over the years. They're all generously offering to use it for free at the moment, but the cynic in me, of course, and I'm sure you can see that it's helpful, it's useful. I'm not ungrateful, but there's obviously an element of self-interest there, and just trying to adjust to all these things and trying to sort of deal with a lot of information that really wasn't clearly planned for. It's been difficult. The approach that I'm going to take is going to be one that I think will hopefully make things a little easier for you. I'm not going to bombard you with asking, to learn a whole number of different online platforms, how to use those that you haven't used before. I think that would be really unfair, and probably an abuse of your time in difficult circumstances. And so what I've tried to do, and you'll see this as you start to go through, and you'll get a chance to look at the first week today, because everything's going to get posted for the first week all at the same time, is the following. Lessons where it would be a little bit more of a discussion on my part, I've tried to create in video form, whether that's my sort of overlaying a particular sort of document and talking about things with a sort of audio commentary, whether it's sort of a presentation where I put a little bit of dialogue in, whether it's taking up homework wherein instead of just discussing it as a group, I'll sort of pre-prepare some of the responses and things I was hoping for you to sort of find in terms of answers. I've tried to do that. I think YouTube is the medium, so long as it keeps working, that I'm going to use, just in the sense that it's really easy for you to access. You can put it on your phone, you can put it on pretty much any computer. Almost everybody, as long as you have internet, has access to that. I won't exclusively make things on YouTube. I'll also provide print stuff, so if you have data issues, then you can obviously sort of access that way as well. But it does at least give an oral component, which I think is useful, and it's also simple to use. EDSB is a blessing for teachers in our position, and so I will have a daily sort of summary of work that you'll have to do. You will be required to pull down certain kinds of handouts and things periodically, but again, they're always in fairly basic format. You've seen that throughout the year: Word, maybe PowerPoint, maybe something along the lines of a PDF, and so it shouldn't really be too difficult. If you want to print things out, that's fine. I would recommend, if you're a person like me who is old-fashioned and likes paper in the hands, you might be smart to actually go and get a couple of ink cartridges built up, because I have a funny feeling stores like that, I don't know how long we're going to be able to get into them regularly, and that's the kind of thing that would just be a nuisance if you do require it not to have. But other than that, I think it should be pretty straightforward. The one other thing, and I may introduce more as we go through, but I want to keep things simple for now, that I will introduce, is that I know sometimes people don't just want a static video that tells them what they need to be doing, but more of a actual interaction between two people. And so I've actually put together, I'll put this in a link with the description that goes with this video. I've put together a Skype page, which I'll be using for office hours. I'm going to make my office hours Monday to Friday, 1 to 4. I'll apologize for not being in the morning. I'm not really a morning person, and I'm just going to sort of adjust to a later period. If you need a morning meeting, I can do that, though. If that's easy enough to accommodate, just let me know. The 1 to 4 is really just if you want to talk, send me a quick email or send me a quick sort of buzz on that particular account. The account, if you want to just set it up, it's just jesse.scott, Jesse for Jesse, at crestwood.on.ca. So I just used my school email. It's 100% a school account. It's different than my personal account. That will be the one that you'll have access to. And if you want to have it available in case you know that you might want feedback, it's there. I know SAP's not the kind of course where you're likely to have a ton of questions compared to like math or science, where those are probably the hardest to do in an e-learning environment. I think a lot of what we do is a little bit more straightforward. But if you're working on like a paper or the ISP, which we'll be working on in a couple of weeks, and you have a question and you want me to actually go through things, we can do that. Or if you have sort of like a draft of something and you want me to give you feedback, that actually might be a lot easier than actually, asking for a written out email, because emails are tedious, and I'm probably going to kind of skip on details a little bit just because there's only so much you can say without spending 2 hours writing the email. Whereas face-to-face through sort of means like that, it might be easier for both of us, 5 minutes, and you might get really good, useful commentary. So I will make that available if you want to make contact, either set up an appointment by email or just sort of log in, send me a message, and I'll be happy to help you that way. Last couple of quick points. I really think, because I'm planning for more than 2 weeks here, I think it's almost becoming near inevitable that that's what's going to happen. At least probably a month is my guess, and maybe the whole year. I want to make sure that you're getting a good academic experience. I'm not naive, as I mentioned in the first video I made. I know some people will probably just see this as 4 months to play PlayStation. And you can see on the wall there, I have that sort of tendency within me as well at times. The catch, though, is that I don't think you want to give into that tendency. You don't want to have 4 months where you haven't done anything and then going back in September and sort of being stale. This is never going to be a normal end to the year. I think it's always going to be perceived by most people as an asterisk. Long term, I don't think you're losing tons. Maximum in terms of face-to-face, we're looking at about 9 weeks of school plus exams, which is 3/4 of the year is done. It's not catastrophic that way, but you still do want to make sure that you get as much out of it as you can. Certainly, just you owe it to yourself to keep learning and try your best to sort of work through and sort of manage your learning as best you can. We'll help you out. We're not there to sort of hold your hand. But try to be the one who actually does follow along, and not the person who just sort of puts themselves behind because they're apathetic and lazy and didn't care. The other thing is, I think this is important, it's hard sometimes to think about work in periods like this when there's a lot of challenges. And I'm sure just on a personal level, people may run into situations where there may be certain challenges that are there. It's inevitable. We all have them, including me. My thought has always been, I'm not a very open person. I tend to bottle things up a lot, but my thought has always been that you're better to be busy in these sorts of situations than to be idle, because when you're idle, your mind gets sort of, drags off in negative directions, and it's just not really an ideal thing. If you can keep your head on things that you have to do, tasks that are in the immediate term, it makes those difficult moments go faster and more easily along, and it's just something that is sort of therapeutic. Now, not everybody's the same way. Some people may find it harder than others, but certainly for me, like even just this last week, I've been busier than I've ever been on March break. I've pretty much not done anything but work for the last week or so, but in a weird way, it's actually been therapeutic. And at least at a psychological level, I think it's actually had kind of a calming effect. It's given a purpose for what otherwise would be a very, very sort of odd period where there's a lot of worries that could easily sort of consume me. Okay, so that sort of gives you a little bit of an idea of what to come. The last point I want to make is that my current plan is to give you kind of installments of work. I don't want to just post day to day to day every week. I think it's probably easier because it's easier for you, easier for me if I just sort of post a bunch for a week. And so what I'm going to do is at the beginning of the week, probably either this week I'm going to do it 3 or 4 days ahead, but usually at least by about Sunday evening, I'll post most of the lessons that you'll require for a stretch. Okay, it could be till middle of the week or to the end of the week, but probably the week. And then you have an opportunity at your leisure to work through it. I would probably devote, 30 minutes maybe to each sort of stretch, maybe a little bit more. Try to treat it like sort of a schedule, but if you want to do, 3 days worth of anthropology one day and then 3 days worth of math another day, I know for me, I'd rather that. I hate having to start and stop and start and stop. I'm going to give you the opportunity where you can. Your first week, the lessons are going to be up. So underneath me right now, you're going to see a whole lot of lessons for 3 days. The first lesson is going to be just a sort of presentation on the Stanley Milgram obedience study, and just sort of conversation about in general obedience as a form of conformity and why it happens, so on and so forth. It picks up a little bit from some of the things we talked about when we looked at Jonestown a couple of weeks ago. It's a really, really important study as well, so please go through that. And then at the end there's a little bit of homework, and the homework's something that's fairly straightforward. It was always going to be homework for that lesson. You'll have that there. I made a video to go with that particular presentation. I would encourage you please to listen. I know some people will probably just skim to the PowerPoint and then just go to the homework. That's your prerogative. You'll get more out of it though if you actually do listen to what I put together, because there are some points that may not necessarily be in print form that come out through the dialogue that I've provided. The second day is going to continue from some of the questions we'll start to look at with the Milgram experiment, as well as the homework, which will be on another experiment. And we'll look a little bit more at experiments in general. And we'll talk a little bit, it's a very short lesson, but I'll talk a little bit with you about just the benefits of experimental research. But also I'll talk a little bit about sort of the challenges that can occur when experiments may have, important ambitions, but they go a little too far. There is going to be an activity. I kind of wrestled with whether or not I wanted to assign a small assignment, but I chose to do so. I just want to sort of test it out more than anything else, but also it gets your feet wet. You're going to have to do a tiny bit of research, but you'll be looking into a famous unethical experiment. I'll give you a list of 10 that are actually in your textbook. And what I want you to do is, from those little seeds, and they're very small descriptions, pick one that you think is kind of unique and interesting to you. Do a little bit of research. There's tons of information of all of these on the web. And then there'll be a little bit of a reflection journal you'll have to complete. And I'll talk about that with the actual paper. I'll put a short sort of summation out there. But hopefully that will work out well. The last day will be a really easy one. It will finish by looking at a final sort of controversial experiment, which was the Stanford prison experiment. There's a video for that. I'm going to have to figure out how to distribute that. I may have to sort of just temporarily put a version of it on Edsby, which when we're back to normal, I'll take off to avoid the copyright issues. But I will make it available to you most likely, and then I'll get that ready today. For that, you just have to watch it, and then there's a couple questions, and if you want, I can post a couple of quick answers, and maybe a little bit of my own summary as well. I don't know if I'll do that in video form, but it'll be there. Next week is not going to be day-to-day lessons. Next week is going to be what it had always been, preparation time for your ISP projects. In terms of the second of 3 components, which is the ISP outline for your essay. And by the way, if you're doing an interview, you might want to switch to an essay, just because I don't know how you're going to do an interview in these moments, unless you can. If you can do it, go ahead, but otherwise do the essay. But an outline, as well as an annotated bibliography. I've put together a video where I've talked about how to use Toronto's, resources in terms of research. I'll actually post that with this video as just sort of a comment, because you may want to actually start working on those ISPs if you've already sort of started in, and that will sort of help you out. It might actually be useful for other courses. There's a ton of stuff on the Toronto Public Library website, and you can use that information there. Hopefully you've got a card, but even if you don't, it still should be somewhat beneficial. You'll get pretty much the week to work on that outline. I'm going to give you extra time compared to what I would have had, just because I know this is going to be an overwhelming stretch and you'll probably want it. The other small adjustment that I'll make is that 2 of the 3 classes originally had a deadline for that paper of April 3rd, and then the last of the 3 classes, which is always the last just time frame in terms of the schedule, was the 6th, which was a Monday. I'm going to make it a universal deadline of Monday, April 6th. And that just gives everybody a little bit more breathing room. It gives you a weekend to complete things, and then hopefully on Monday you'll have that in. Now, I do have to put a time on that. I'm going to say noon on Monday the 6th. If you get it done earlier, please send it along. It's actually more helpful to me if I get it a little ahead, because it spreads my marking out, which for your classes can be a lot of work. But you don't have to. If you want to hit that later deadline, that's fine. Beyond those 2 weeks, I actually haven't really clearly planned everything out yet. That's what I'm going to start working on over the next week or so. The reality is that I'm a little hesitant to go too much further, because I just don't know whether we're going to be back, whether we're going to be doing more of this, probably more of this kind of thing. But we'll see. But until that point, I don't really want to put any information out there, because it's going to require a little bit more thought and consideration. The week after these 2 weeks is a short one before Easter, so you do in 3 weeks actually have a 4-day weekend coming up, so that will give everybody a little bit of a chance to breathe after getting used to this new experience. Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. If you want to add me, go ahead on Skype, and if if you want to sort of discuss things, that's fine. But otherwise, hopefully you're doing well. Hopefully your first week goes smoothly, and good luck with all of the, I guess, work from home that you'll be doing. All right, take care.